The once permeable borders of the Middle East have hardened more and more to divide people and resources. This has created a diaspora of exiles across the region. Jordan has been housing refugees throughout the history of the modern Middle East, but has now reached its capacity and faces enormous strain on its resources, particularly water. To slow down the refugee influx through its borders, the Jordanian government built additional earthen berms along the northeastern segment of the border. Currently, there are 2 berms along the edges of the 1916 Sykes-Picot Jordan-Syria borderline. Since 2011, the Jordan-Syrian border has become the point of entry of a mass exodus of Syrian refugees. As the situation in Syria worsened, hundreds of thousands of people immigrated to Jordan by land. To stem the overwhelming flow of migrants, the northern border crossings began to close. Security concerns posed by ISIS increased, calling for Jordan to permanently close its border. As a result, the berms began to swell with refugees at 2 main points, Rukban with about 77,500 refugees and Jawdat with about 7,500 refugees.
In a no man's land between 2 countries. These Syrians are desperate to escape the so-called Islamic State, but Jordan has shut them out. Living in tough conditions, they come under repeated attack. But still, the numbers grow. A few hundred meters is all that stands between the Syrians and safety here in Jordan. But having suffered a number of attacks themselves, Jordanians say opening the borders is simply too risky.
والله أنا إلي ناس على الساتر وإنا قرايبين وطلعوا من شدة القصف من البلد وإجوا من مهين ومن حوارين ومن القريتين ومن جيرود إجانا ناس كتير على الساتر هي وهلأ لسه ما دخلوا. الأرض هنا العبارة ساتر هو ترابي محطوط مثل السكر هيك ترابي والأرض صحراء قحرة ما فيها شيء. فيها العقارب، فيها الحيايا، فيها الحشرات، فيها الوحوش.
A line flanked by the aforementioned berms creates a 7-kilometer wide no man's land. The southern berm delineates the official point of entry into Jordan. We analyzed fog patterns across the region to see where the greatest amount of fog could be harvested. Fog is produced when the heat absorbed by the Earth during the day is released into the atmosphere during night, mixing in with cool wind. The greater the temperature difference, the greater the amount of fog. Mesh is used to capture the water molecules in the fog. Water droplets collect on the mesh through hydrophobic and hydrophilic processes as they run downwards and drip into a gutter at the bottom of the net. To ameliorate the current conditions facing refugees at the berm, the existing placement and congregations of tents were analyzed, then compared with the UNHCR emergency guidelines for refugee camp community standards. Each berm cluster will consist approximately of 40 families, roughly 200 people, a range that is serviced by combinations of fog towers that can collect 800 to 2,000 liters daily and shaded fog wells that can collect around 500 liters a day. The site is transformed through a phasing strategy. The puncturing of the berm using on-site tractors to allow resources entrance. Tractors begin creating a key line from berm to plant, allowing water to channel from the cluster into the permaculture. Refugees begin to cluster around fog collector. Additional resources trucked to the site to build fog towers and the backbone sanitation service infrastructure. Once the permaculture systems have matured, harvesting of food and resources such as date trees can begin to self-sustain communities. The shaded fog structure can be built by refugees from on-site material. The structure is built out of palm wood while the mesh is knitted from ration sacks used to transport aid. The structure harvests enough drinking water while providing shade and congregational spaces. Some configurations have been designed to harvest solar power for electricity. The large fog tower is built similarly but has the ability to harvest more water. The spiral structure carries the water collected from fog into an underground reservoir tank. The water collected is then channeled into the service spaces, permaculture, and shaded fog catchers. Clean water from the fog collectors is channeled into the showers and gray water into the latrines. The black water is channeled into the back of the berm into a constructed wetland to filter the water so it can be used for irrigation in the permaculture landscape. The Jordan Response Plan for its Syrian crisis has received aid from organizations to provide resources to Syrian refugees. The plan has allotted $2.6 billion worth of aid, while our intervention in Hadalat would cost roughly $100,000. Rather than seeing the zone as a holding area, No Man's Land seeks to inhabit the berm and empower refugees by using fog harvesting, wastewater management, permaculture, and landscaping techniques to create the possibility of an autonomy. However, the conflict may remain keeping people in holding for the foreseeable future, a scenario that begs the question, could No Man's Land turn into a future megacity? Or, if the conflict subsides and refugees are able to return home, will this area become a ruin?